this is task number 19, cross match. My name is Nicole Bruno. So I have my patient here. This is Maggie. She's going to be my donor. So first I have my syringe, my 3 milliliter syringe. I have alcohol and I have an EDTA tube. So Leanna is just going to hold off her cephalic vein for me. Going to apply alcohol. So I'm going to obtain 2 mLs. So Leanna's just going to hold off for me. So I have 2.5 mLs of my blood here. I'm going to put it into my EDTA tube. And I'm just going to invert it. While Leanna's holding, I'm just going to write Maggie, and I'm just going to write donor on my tube, so that's labeled. I'm just going to check. Okay, and once it's okay and checked, then we're done with our donor blood draw and we'll draw from our recipient. So I have my recipient patient here. This is Charlie. So I'm going to be drawing from his back leg here. And again, I have my syringe and I have my EDTA tube. So apply alcohol. I have at least 2 mLs, so I'm done. Leanna's just going to hold off. I have my blood here. I'm going to place it into my EDTA tube. Okay. Just going to invert it. And now I'm going to label it. So this is Charlie, and this is my recipient. I'm just going to check the site. Looks good. So now we can continue with the task. So now that we have obtained our samples, I have my donor sample from Maggie and my recipient sample from Charlie. I'm now going to spin them in the centrifuge for 1,000 RPMs for about 5 minutes. So I'm just going to place them in and then put one on each end and make sure they're balanced. I'm going to close the centrifuge and set it for 5 minutes, and then we'll resume once it's done. So our donor and recipient samples have just finished spinning. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, using a pipette, take off the plasma from both samples, the donor and the recipient, and put them in separate tubes, and do the same with the red blood cells. So I just have my pipette here. So first I'm going to label my plain white top tube. And this one, I'm just going to start with Maggie, who was the donor. So I'm going to write Maggie, donor, plasma. Going to uncap. And then I'm slowly going to take the plasma from my spun Maggie donor and place it into my plain top. You want to make sure you don't take up any of the blood cells. So now I have my Maggie, or my donor plasma. Now I'm going to do the same with my Charlie recipient. So I'm going to label this Charlie recipient plasma. And now you want to change your pipette because it is a different sample. Okay. Just going to uncap my plain top. Then I have my Charlie recipient. And I'm going to take the plasma off and place it into my plain tube for Charlie. Again, you want to make sure you don't take up any of the red blood cells. Recap. Okay. So now I have my Charlie recipient plasma as well as my Maggie donor. So I'm just going to put those to the side. Next, what you want to do is put the red blood cells in a separate plain white top tube. So you're going to put about 3 to 5 drops of packed whole red blood cells into each tube. So this one I'm going to write Maggie red blood cells. Just going to open it up, change my pipette. And I'm going to place my 3 to 5 drops of red blood cells, packed whole red blood cells into there. One, two, three, 4, 5. Okay. I'm going to cap it. And again, now this is my Maggie red blood cells or my donor. Donor on here. Okay. And now I'm going to do the same with my Charlie recipient red blood cells. So I'm just going to label this Charlie recipient red blood cells. So I'm going to change my pipette again. You always want to change it when you're switching samples. Open up my Charlie plain top. And here is my Charlie packed whole red blood cells. And I'm going to do the same, 3 to 5 drops. Okay. Recap. Recap. So now I have my plasma samples from both my donor and recipient, and I have my red blood cell samples from my donor recipient, and then now we can begin our wash. So now we're going to wash our red blood cells. So we have our Maggie donor red blood cells and our Charlie recipient red blood cells. So what we're going to do is put 5 to 10 mLs of saline into each tube to wash them. So I'm just going to put in 5. So here's 5 mLs into my Maggie donor. Just going to recap. And now I'm going to put 5 mLs into my Charlie recipient. Okay. So now I have both of my tubes. So now I'm going to spin them down the centrifuge. Okay. Just going to recap my saline. So we're going to spin them in the centrifuge for 5 minutes. Just going to turn this. Okay. Five minutes. And once they're done, we'll continue. So both of our washed red blood cell tubes have just finished spinning. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the supernate from both tubes with my syringe and discard it. So first I have my Maggie red blood cell donor, which was the wash with the saline. I'm just going to take a new syringe, going to uncap. I'm just going to take out the supernate. Discard it. Okay. So recap. And I'm going to do the same with my Charlie recipient red blood cells and saline. So I'm going to get a new syringe. I'm going to take off the supernate and discard of it. Okay. And now that we finished that, we're going to repeat our wash 2 more times for a total of 3 times. So now that I've finished my wash, I'm going to make my 3 to 5% red blood cell solution. So first I'm just going to label 2 plain top tubes. So this is Maggie, donor, 3 to 5% solution or suspension. And this is Charlie, recipient, 3 to 5%. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 1 drop of my red blood cells from both my donor and my recipient into separate tubes and add 20 drops of saline into both of these separate tubes as well. So I'm going to use my 18-gauge needle to draw up the red blood cells to not cause any harm to the cells. So here's my 18-gauge needle I'm going to place on. So first I'm going to do my Maggie donor. I'm going to uncap. I'm going to take my 18-gauge needle. I'm going to draw up enough for 1 drop. Recap. I'm going to place this 1 drop into my Maggie 3 to 5% suspension tube. I'm going to take off the needle and place my 1 drop. Okay. Here's my drop. Now what I'm going to do is place my 20 drops of saline into my Maggie donor. Move this out of the way. Just going to pour some saline into here. It's easier for me to draw up. Okay. Too much there? Okay. So I'm going to take my syringe and I'm going to do my 20 drops. So I'm just going to draw some up in here. I'm putting my 20 drops into my 1 drop of red blood cell Maggie donor tube. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20. Okay, perfect. Going to recap. So now I'm going to do the same thing with my Charlie recipient tubes. So I have my Charlie recipient. Going to draw up 1 drop using my 18-gauge needle to not harm the cells. Okay. Recap. I'm going to put my 1 drop into my Charlie 3 to 5% suspension tube. Okay. And now I'm going to add my 20 drops of saline to my Charlie 3 to 5% suspension. Draw it up here. Okay. So now I have my Charlie recipient 3 to 5% suspension and my Maggie donor 3 to 5% suspension. So I'm now going to make my donor recipient test tubes. First I'm going to do my major, which is my recipient plasma and my donor cells, or my donor red blood cells. So I'm going to take a new tube and I'm just going to write major. So again, for my major, I'm going to take my recipient plasma, which is Charlie's plasma here, and I'm going to add 2 drops into my tube using my pipette. I'm just put 2 drops. 1, 2, okay. So now I'm going to take 1 drop of my donor cells, which is my Maggie donor suspension, and I'm going to add it to the same tube, my major tube. One drop. Okay. And now I have my major tube. So now I'm going to go on to my minor. So my minor is 2 drops of donor plasma and 1 drop of the recipient cells. So I'm going to make a new tube and write minor. Okay, just put my major over here. Change my pipette. So again, it's the 2 drops of the donor plasma. Okay, so here is my Maggie donor plasma. Get a new pipette. 2 drops into my minor tube. Okay. I'm going to recap. Change my pipette. And then I'm going to do my 1 drop of recipient cells. So here's my Charlie recipient. This is my Charlie recipient suspension. I'm going to do 1 drop. Okay. So now I have my minor tube. So now lastly, I'm just going to change my pipette. And now I'm going to do my recipient control. So the recipient control is the recipient plasma and the recipient cells. So I'm just going to write control here. So my recipient plasma, so I'm going to do 2 drops. So here is my Charlie recipient plasma. I'm going to take a new pipette. Recap. And then I'm going to do 1 drop of my recipient cells, which is my Charlie 3 to 5 suspension. So change my pipette. Okay, so now I have my major, my minor, and my control. I'm going to gently mix them. And I'm going to incubate them for 15 minutes at room temperature. So I'm just going to sit them here. And I'll set a timer and have them sit for 15 minutes. So my major, minor, and control tubes have been incubating for 15 minutes at room temperature. So now I'm going to spin them. I'm going to spin them for 15 seconds at 1000. So I'm just going to turn on my centrifuge, and I'm going to place them in here. I'm going to use my balance tube. So again, I have all 3 tubes in here. I'm just going to close it, and time it for 15 seconds. My major, minor, and control have just finished spinning in my centrifuge, so I'm going to take them out using hemostats to make sure not to disturb the cells. And then I'm going to visually look for any agglutination, and then I'm going to look microscopically. So here is my major. There appears to be a small amount of agglutination. I'm just going to set it down here. Here is my control. It also appears to have some agglutination, not as much. And lastly, here is my balance tube. Here is my minor. The minor appears to have the least amount of agglutination. Okay. So now once I just visually looked at them, I'm going to invert them, resuspend them, and I'm going to look at them under a microscope. Okay, so I have my microscope slide set up here. First, what I want to do is I'm going to re-invert the samples. And I'm going to record my findings in the patient's record. And again, this is just for the visual. So my major does still have a small amount of agglutination. Visual, small agglutination. Then I have my minor and my control. So my control also had and still does small amount of agglutination. And the minor also does, but definitely has the least amount. Okay. So now I'm going to put one drop of the major, minor, and control on separate slides, and then I'm going to evaluate them under the microscope. So I have my pipette. Just going to label these major, minor, control. So here's my minor. Put my one drop. Going to evaluate it on 4 power. So based on evaluating my minor slide, I do see very small, barely any agglutination on my slide. Again, there is a very small amount of clumping. I see one area, but that's it. So I'm just going to record that in my patient's record. So minor, microscopically, one small clumping area. Next, I'm going to change my pipette, of course, and I'm going to do my major. So I'm going to take a new pipette, place one drop on the slide. And I'm going to evaluate this under 4 power as well. So looking through my major slide, I do see a pretty large amount of clumping on my slide microscopically. So I'm just going to record that. So this is my major. I'm going to put moderate amount of clumping. Okay. And now lastly, I'm just going to do my control. New pipette. again. So I'm now going to examine this under 4 power. So I do see a small amount of clumping on this slide, more than my minor, but definitely less than my major. So lastly, I'm just going to record my control in my patient's record. So small amount, more than minor, less than major. And this is how you would perform a cross-match on a patient.